Before I start the video, as a quick reminder, check out my links down below to help support the channel. I am now in partnership with Baron of Dice. They have some awesome TCG accessories like playmats, deck boxes, and dice. And if you want to level up your setup, it is the perfect way to do so. And if you want to support the channel directly and get some sweet perks, consider joining the Patreon. If you want to get early access to videos or even some deck help, Patreon is where it's at. And so without further ado, let's get back into the video. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Jurassic Magic, and we're continuing talking about some of the new Avatar Last Airbender commanders, and one that I think is extremely powerful would be Wan Shi Tong, Librarian. And as a design perspective, this is extremely powerful. I think it's probably going to be better in the 99 rather than as a commander. Then again, as a commander itself, I think it's going to be still pretty strong. I mean, come on, really, it's just card draw in the command zone. What's better than that? However, if you are looking to build this commander, you are at the right place. I am going to be discussing a total guide around how to build around this and some strategies you may want to follow. However, if this is your first time seeing this commander, I do want to give a breakdown on what it does. It has a casting cost of X double blue, legendary creature bird spirit with flash, flying, and vigilance. And when it does enter, you put X1 with counters on it and then draw half X cards rounded down. So first I have to stop there. That is going to be pretty powerful, kind of similar to Hydroid Krasis, but let's be real, maybe a lot better. The fact that it has flash, you could respond to somebody casting a spell or even searching their library. You could pay how much you want into the X ability, or really if anything else, you don't have to pay into the X ability at all. You could just pay that 2 blue mana, flash it onto the battlefield, and I think that would be very important for that second ability. Whenever an opponent searches their library, put a +1/+1 counter on Wan Shi Tong and draw a card. So this is going to be fantastic because you could just flash this in at any time when somebody's going to search their library. You get to draw a card and buff itself up, and honestly over time, the more people search their libraries with fetch lands, tutors, or even ramping, putting lands onto their battlefield, you're going to be drawing cards in the process and outvaluing your opponents. This is very versatile at the beginning of the game, or it can be versatile at the late game. Let's just say you haven't casted it at all for some reason, even though I would honestly cast it as fast as you can. You could just put it directly onto the battlefield, flash it in, and pay any amount into the X ability. Let's just say 6. It enters as a 7/7 and you draw 3 cards. That's decent, but again, I would rather cast it as early as you can. So that is the commander. That is a little bit of a breakdown on what it does. Now I want to shift my focus on talking about what this video is about. First of all, I'm going to talk about the staples of the deck, then I will talk about synergizing with our commander, then focusing on win cons. And so without further ado, let's get it started by talking about the staples. So in any commander deck, you need ramp, card draw, and interaction. You're going to have plenty of card draw in this deck with your commander and other means. But first, let's go over ramp. We want to get as much mana as we can, so potentially we could pay a lot into that X ability. A newer card I like is Bender's Water Skin. This one is going to be incredible in many different blue decks because you could untap this artifact during each other player's untap step. So technically this is a 3 mana rock, which not a lot of people like, but in this situation, this is extremely powerful because you can tap it during your turn, untap it on your opponent's turn, cast a spell on their turn, like your commander or other means. This is just going to provide 1 mana basically any type of turn you play it. You may as well include some mana rocks like Thought Vessel or even Decanter of Endless Water, mainly because you have no maximum hand size. You don't want to necessarily lose all that mana you're gaining. You could also throw in Reliquary Tower in this mix, so that way you don't lose the cards you're drawing off of your commander or other cards. You probably noticed already most of these cards are going to be artifact ramp, and that's what we're mostly going to be relying on. So that's why I like a card like Liquid Metal Torque. This has some versatile applications because we do have some removal in our deck that exiles artifacts. We could use the ability of Liquid Metal Torque to make another non-land permanent become an artifact in addition to its other types. So if somebody has a Pesky Ristic Study, we could just exile it by making it into an artifact. And that does lead me into the next topic of interaction. There is a ton of interaction in blue. We don't need to mention all the counter spells that you could be playing because of course it's kind of endless, but I did want to go over some interaction that you should probably run more in your blue decks, like Raven Form or even Resculpt. These are so good, so underrated in my opinion. You exile a target artifact or creature, and in return that opponent gets a creature, whether it's a bird or an elemental token. Plus, like I mentioned previously, this does work with Liquid Metal Torque, so definitely run these are so good. I also like the idea of running bounce spells that will bounce your opponent's creatures, but most importantly bounce your own creatures, because there's sometimes where you have a lot of mana lying around. You may want to use that and get a lot of card draw off of your commander if it's on the battlefield, you could use something like Snap to return your commander back to your hand and untap those 2 lands that you used. So with that in turn, you could just cast your commander for X and get that value of making it beefy and get some card draw. And speaking of card draw, you can kind of go down the rabbit hole a little bit further by including cards like Polywog Prodigy. If you recast your commander, and as long as your commander is bigger than Polywog, you could make Polywog grow. And whenever people are casting non-creature spells, and if that non-creature spell is lower than Polywog's power, you get to draw that card. I also like Fairy Mastermind. This is also another banger that whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn, you draw a card, and it has the activated ability of each player drawing a card. So this is obviously more of a draw go style of deck where you're really just waiting for the opportune time to strike at your opponents, maybe countering some spells, maybe removing some targets. This is going to be a mean deck, more geared towards bracket 3, bracket 4, probably more towards bracket 4 if anything else. So that's why in the deck list you may see a Rhystic Study or even the One Ring. But in all honesty, we do want to get the most out of our commander's ability. That's why I do believe clones are going to be a very viable strategy. I feel like I talk about clones here and there. I just talked about it with Azula pretty recently. I feel like clones are going to be really good with Wan Shi Tong, mainly because you get to draw more cards and get a buff for battlefield. You could use ones that evade the non-legendary rule like Spark Double or the other versions of Sakashima, simply because the more copies we have of Wan Shi Tong and the more people search their libraries, the more we're going to be drawing cards. It's kind of just a win-win for us. I also like the idea of going into Voltron too, because it is getting huge over time. You might as well take advantage of that because it has Vigilance, Flying. Those are some pretty good stats where you could swing in, stay behind, and block other people's creatures. One Voltron piece I absolutely love in a monocolored deck is Commander's Play, even though it is quite expensive, but I like the idea of giving equipped creature +3/+3 and protection from each color that's not in your commander's color identity. So it's essentially going to get protection from white, red, green, and black. You could also include another one like Sword of Truth and Justice. This also is pretty good too because it gives protection from white and blue. And whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, then you proliferate. So essentially you're getting 2 counters on your commander on combat. Though I will say there's one downside to your commander, the fact that most people are going to try to remove it as much as they can so that they can search the libraries and not give you card draw. So you may as well include cards like Hammer of Nazan, or a better option with Mithril Coat. Giving your commander indestructible is invaluable. Also, you may want to give your commander the option of not getting targeted by any spells like Swiftfoot Boots or even Lightning Greaves too. However, because you are drawing a lot of cards, a fun option would be easily Imperial Plate. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each card in your hand. I like this option because it works with our commander. We're drawing cards left and right. You might as well take advantage of that, buff up your commander even further, and swing in for commander lethal. But of course, that's not the only way to win the game. There's a ton of other ways to win the game, and that's what I'm going to be discussing next. Because this is a bracket 4 style deck, there's going to be some combos that you could utilize with your commander because technically it is an infinite mana outlet because of that X ability. If you have some way of getting infinite mana, you could draw your whole entire deck and make it huge. So one way you could get infinite mana is by using Hullbreaker Horror. You could also use another version of it like Tidespout Tyrant, but Hullbreaker Horror is easily better. So the way you can get infinite mana with Hullbreaker Horror is if you have 2 mana positive rocks. Let's just say hypothetically you have Soul Ring and Mox Opal, and you have Metalcraft online. You cast one of those on the battlefield, tap it for mana, cast the other one, return that other one you put on the battlefield to your hand, and rinse and repeat until you get infinite mana because of Hullbreaker Horror, and then you can cast your commander to draw your whole entire deck. Of course, that's a little boring, but again, if you're in the bracket 4 scenario, that is a way to win. Another win con you could utilize because you're probably going to be drawing a stupid amount of cards is Psychosis Crawler. I love this card so much. It has that ability whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life, and if you have some way of drawing your whole entire deck with your commander, getting infinite mana, or if you just have a lot of mana lying around, you could just drain everybody on the table, and if they have not enough life, you're most likely going to be winning the game there. So with that said, that is going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Wan Shi Tong Librarian. This is a very powerful commander. I think it's going to be better in the 99. Either way, this is going to be a very expensive card because people love their draw engines. So I would like to hear from you. What are your thoughts about this commander? Do you plan on building it yourself or plan on putting it in the 99 of some of your decks? Again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, if you can, on your way out, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.